Good Monday afternoon, everybody. My name is Eli Robinson. I am the Chief Trivia Officer here at Water Cooler Trivia, where we take and create a trivia game every single week for you, your coworkers, your office, your friends, your family, those who love to play online against each other, have a little competition, increase camaraderie, have a good time together, and hopefully learn something in the process. You can find us online at watercoolertrivia.com, and you can find me online at Chief Trivia Officer. So this week's game was titled President's Day. This is how the results looked. So the quiz turned out to be rather easy, which I'll show you why here in a second. This is what our easy quiz graph usually looks like. If you remember last week, it was much flatter. As far as each of the answer percentages were much closer to one another. Usually it looks something like this, where the vast majority of scores equal 9 or 10. The median is 9, the average of 8.57. We tried to be fairly straightforward in what we did this week. But let's take a look at what it was. It says this coming Monday, February 20th is a holiday in the United States, but honestly there's pretty extreme debate as to what the official name of the celebration is. It's all because of a pesky apostrophe. Apostrophes matter in this world, as this is a real sentence in English. It's not it's, isn't it? So in celebration of the holiday and the punctuation mark, questions 1 through 10 in this week's quiz will have an apostrophe in the answer. Happy pick your spelling of choice day. So technically the federal holiday is actually called Washington's birthday. It's not called President's Day, but in most US states it is called President's Day. And going back to the title, it's actually not clear where the apostrophe goes. Some states call it President's Day, some call it President apostrophe S Day, and some call it multiple presidents apostrophe day. So we took it easy on people, I think, generally, by asking questions that were pretty straightforward that had an apostrophe in them. I think people enjoyed them. Two that I wanted to call out. So the first one, where do we go? Where do we go now? Where do we go now? Where do we go? Okay, that's not actually the question. The real question, Guns N' Roses clearly have a thing for apostrophes, as their only #1 single is what Tot titled Ballad. So 69% correct on this one of the harder ones in this week's game. So the answer is Sweet Child of Mine. I just thought I'd kind of talk about this for a second, because this, in some ways, this trivia question is a know it or you don't. There's not a lot of clues in the question that would have allowed you to intuit the answer to the question. So the first 4 questions that are there are lyrics from the song. Then it's you have to know a Guns N' Roses song with an apostrophe in it, and the one little hint you get is Tot titled, so about kids or children or whatever it may be. So the question is basically, how famous does a song need to be for us to ask a you know it or you don't, right? Songs like Hey Jude, songs like Thriller, songs like, I don't know what's popular these days, I don't even know, Despacito, those are fine, right? But somewhere along the line, there is some sort of middle ground where you have to decide as a trivia writer, whether or not a song is famous enough to write it as a you know it or you don't. We made the decision that Sweet Child of Mine is. Once we found out that it was the only #1 single that Guns N' Roses had. Some people can name, Welcome to the Jungle or a couple other songs, but it really is kind of like their signature song. We decided that it would be appropriate to include. If you're writing trivia, you really have to think about whether or not something is famous enough for giving it the you know it or you don't treatment. Second question I want to highlight this week. Originally, it was used to describe the first bullet fired of the American Revolution at the Old North Bridge. However, it has come to also refer to Bobby Thompson's home run to help the Giants win the pennant in 1951. What is this 6-word phrase? So I wrote this question, and I actually wrote this question poorly. So in some ways, it's a little bit of a mea culpa. So when you're talking about phrases, you need to give them gravitas. Any phrase can be trivialized, right? I could say something out loud and be like, what did Eli Robinson say? Whatever it may be. So I actually did not properly contextualize the phrase in this trivia question, which means that technically if you're reading it, you're like, well, I could have named anything this 6-word phrase, right? And so that's on me. It was poorly written. It didn't seem to really hurt that much, as 73% of people got it right. It turns out the phrase was actually coined by Ralph Waldo Emerson in an 1837 poem called Concord Hymn about Lexington and Concord. So I would have liked to have worked that in. Instead of saying originally it was used to describe, I would have said Ralph Waldo Emerson described, because then you actually properly contextualizing the quote-unquote phrase in history. And so the first stanza of that poem, by the rude bridge that arched the flood, their flag to April's breeze unfurled. And here once the embattled farmer stood and fired, the shot heard round the world. So the shot heard round the world is the correct answer. A couple of you, and in a side note also, the Giants win the pennant, the Giants win the pennant, is obviously like a big moment in sports calls. I believe this term, so a couple of people were very happy to see that. Also, I believe the shot heard around the world may be used a little bit for Archduke Franz Ferdinand being shot prior to World War I, but these are the two that kind of came to mind when we wrote it. As you can see, once again, this week's quiz was fairly straightforward and easy, which we have no problem after coming after last week's mystery round, and we'll see how people do with next week. A really fun topic and a little bit off the beaten path for what we do. Once again, my name is Eli Robinson. I'm the Chief Trivia Officer here at Water Cooler Trivia. Come join us at watercoolertrivia.com. We have a 4-week free trial for anybody who wants to give it a shot. Until next week, keep on tripping on.